Imagine this, a man worth billions, tears streaming down his face in the middle of a bustling mall, clutching a receipt that shatters his world. What could possibly break a titan like him? Stick around, because this story of unexpected kindness will restore your faith in humanity, and if it touches your heart like it did mine, smash that like button and subscribe for more inspiring tales that prove miracles happen every day. Alexander Thorne was no ordinary billionaire. At 52, he'd built an empire from nothing, tech startups, real estate ventures, and investments that spanned the globe. But success had come at a cost. Years of betrayal in boardrooms, failed marriages, and fair-weather friends had turned his heart to stone. He trusted no one, believed in nothing but the cold logic of numbers. People are predictable, he'd say to his assistants. Give them an inch, and they'll take your fortune. It was this cynicism that led him to his infamous tests. He'd hand over his unlimited credit card to strangers, a homeless man, a struggling artist, even a celebrity once, just to see what they'd do. Most splurged on luxuries, confirming his bleak view. But one day, fate introduced him to someone who would rewrite his rules. It started on a rainy afternoon in New York City. Alex was rushing from a meeting, his sleek black limo idling at the curb, when he nearly collided with a young woman on the sidewalk. She was in her early 20s, drenched from the downpour, fumbling with a broken umbrella. Her name was Lila Harper, though he wouldn't learn that until later. What struck him first was her silence. No apology tumbled from her lips. Instead, she signed frantically with her hands, her eyes wide with embarrassment. Lila was deaf, born that way, and had learned to navigate a hearing world with grit and grace. She worked as a barista at a small coffee shop, saving every penny for her dream, to open a community center for deaf children like her younger siblings. Alex paused, intrigued. He wasn't one for small talk, but something about her vulnerability pierced his armor. Here, he said abruptly, pulling out his platinum card from his wallet. He pressed it into her palm, his voice gruff. Buy whatever you want. No limits. Let's see what you do with it. Lila stared at him, confused, her fingers tracing the embossed name, Alexander Thorne. She signed a question, why, but he just waved her off, climbing into his car with a smirk. Test number 47, he muttered to himself. He expected the usual, designer clothes, jewelry, maybe a fancy gadget. His team would track the purchases, and he'd reclaim the card later, adding another notch to his cynical belt. But Lila wasn't like the others. Orphaned young, she'd been raised by her grandparents in a modest apartment in Queens. Her deafness had isolated her as a child, bullied at school, overlooked by teachers who didn't bother learning sign language. Yet, she found solace in art and community. She volunteered at a local shelter for deaf families, teaching kids to express themselves through painting and dance. Money was always tight, her grandparents' pensions barely covered rent, and her siblings, twins, both deaf like her, needed hearing aids and therapy that insurance wouldn't touch. Holding Alex's card felt like holding a grenade. Temptation whispered, a new laptop for her online classes, clothes that didn't come from thrift stores. But as she wandered into the mall, her thoughts drifted to those who had even less. Her first stop was an electronics store. The clerk raised an eyebrow as she pointed to high-end hearing aids, not for herself, but models designed for children. She bought a dozen pairs, along with batteries and accessories. Next, she headed to a toy store, loading a cart with educational games adapted for deaf kids, puzzles with sign language alphabets, vibrating alarm clocks, and storybooks with illustrations that told tales without words. The total climbed quickly, but she didn't stop. At a bookstore, she selected volumes on ASL teaching methods, entrepreneurship for the disabled, and inspirational biographies of figures like Helen Keller. Then, to a furniture outlet for desks and chairs, simple, sturdy ones that could furnish a small classroom. Alex's phone buzzed with alerts from his bank. At first, he chuckled, electronics, toys? But as the list grew, curiosity turned to confusion. No purses, no shoes, no spa days. He instructed his driver to head to the mall, arriving just as Lila emerged from an art supply store, arms full of canvases, paints, and easels. She spotted him and froze, signing an explanation he couldn't understand. Frustrated, he demanded the receipts. What he saw floored him. Every item was for others. The hearing aids? For her siblings and kids at the shelter. The toys and books? Donations to start a learning program. The furniture and art supplies? To convert her grandparents' garage into a makeshift community center. She'd even purchased gift cards for groceries, directing them to families in need through the shelter's network. Not a single thing for herself. The grand total, over $50,000 in a few hours, all selfless. Tears welled in Alex's eyes as he pieced it together. This wasn't greed, it was pure, unadulterated goodness. Why? He asked, his voice cracking. Lila, sensing his emotion, pulled out her phone and typed, "Because the world gave me challenges, but it also gave me love. I want to pass that on." In that moment, Alex's walls crumbled. He thought of his own lonely childhood, abandoned by parents chasing wealth, and how he'd let bitterness define him. Lila's act wasn't just kind, it was a mirror, showing him what he'd lost. But the story doesn't end there. Shaken, Alex didn't reclaim the card. Instead, he signed up for ASL classes that very week. He visited the shelter, meeting Lila's family, the twins, wide-eyed and energetic, her grandparents beaming with pride. Challenges arose. Alex's board questioned his sudden philanthropy, calling it a PR stunt. Old wounds resurfaced as he confronted his ex-wife, admitting how his distrust had ruined their marriage. Lila faced her own hurdles, skepticism from the community about accepting help from a stranger, and the logistics of building the center amid zoning laws and funding gaps. Together, they navigated it all. Alex funded the community center properly, turning it into a state-of-the-art facility with classrooms, therapy rooms, and even a small cafe where deaf baristas like Lila could train others. He learned sign language fluently, forming a bond with Lila that blossomed into friendship, then mentorship. She taught him empathy, he taught her business acumen. When vandals targeted the center, jealous rivals spreading rumors, Lila's resilience shone. She organized a fundraiser, rallying the neighborhood with silent auctions and art shows. Alex stood by her, using his influence to secure permits and donations. Months turned to years. The center thrived, helping hundreds of deaf children find their voices in a silent world. Alex, transformed, started a foundation for accessibility initiatives worldwide. He remarried, not for status, but for love, and invited Lila as his best woman at the wedding. Her siblings, now teenagers, excelled in school, one pursuing engineering, the other art. In the end, that rainy day collision wasn't coincidence, it was destiny. Alex often reflects on that mall moment, the receipt that made him cry not from loss, but from overwhelming joy. She didn't just spend my money, he'd say. She invested in humanity. And Lila? She built more than a center, she rebuilt a man's soul. If this story moved you, imagine the lives it could touch. Hit that like button if it restored your faith, and subscribe for more heartwarming journeys that remind us, kindness isn't weakness, it's the ultimate strength. What's your act of kindness today? Share in the comments below.